welcome to Live from My Drum Room. It's a pleasure to see you all today. And it's a real pleasure to welcome a friend for many years and truly a legend, the one and only Omar Hakim, live from his studio. Yeah.
Hey, man.
Oh, man. So good to see you. Thank you for being here today, Omar. Appreciate it.
Oh, great to see you too, man. It's been too long.
I know. Yeah. Wow. I don't even know where to start. I was looking, thinking about doing this and started to look at all the amazing work you've done through the years. And it's probably easier to talk about the bands you haven't played with, like maybe on one hand, I don't think you recorded with the Beatles or Led Zeppelin no, but you
no.
probably recorded with Paul McCartney, maybe, possibly.
Well, I actually just did some playing with him that was kind of fun.
Okay. Yep.
At the Taylor Hawkins tribute shows.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I made a note about that, and I do want to get to that and talk about that too.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And let me just ask you, since you mentioned that, were you and Taylor pretty tight? Did you guys get pretty tight over the years, or?
Well, we weren't super tight, only because I don't live in Los Angeles, but whenever they would come to the East Coast, I would always hang out with them. Yeah. Dave and I stayed in touch from the moment we met, and how that happened was around the time of the Wasting Light record. Rachel and I had just come home from a tour, and that was definitely a record that we were kind of rocking on the road, on the tour bus or whatever. And so when we got home, she says, Omar, the Foos are playing at Madison Square Garden. You should go, or we should go. So I checked for the tickets, and I saw that the tickets were sold out.
Mm.
So then I was like, well, dang, okay, how do I do this? And then I thought to myself, oh, well, Dave and Taylor play Zildjian cymbals. And do you remember I actually called you?
Oh, no kidding.
And you were the one that connected me with those guys. And you said to me, oh, they'll get back to you. They always get back. They're going to get back to you within the week. And I was like, wow, that would be great. This we've got about a week before the show. And you hit send on that email. And 3 hours later, Taylor wrote back. In 3 hours, I was shocked. He goes, dude, we know who you are. We love you, man. We got you. How many tickets you need? And he was so cool.
Yeah.
And so we went to Madison Square Garden. The show was banging. But it was crowded backstage, and Taylor came out and he said, Dave wants to meet you. The guys want to meet you, but it's kind of a zoo here. We're playing in Newark, New Jersey tomorrow. You should come, and because it won't be so crazy. It'll give us a chance to hang out. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to bug you. You've done so much for us. It's really great. And then I get an elbow in my ribs from my wife. Hey. And I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm definitely going tomorrow.
Always pay attention to the elbow from the wife. Yeah,
the wife elbow is, very enlightening.
Omar, that's sorry, continue. Yeah.
No, well, anyway, next night comes. It's a great hang. I meet Dave. I meet the rest of the guys, and we've stayed in touch ever since.
Yeah.
And in fact, I played percussion on their last record on Medicine at Midnight.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, it's been a long relationship, not as close as I would have liked to have been, but every time we got together, it was always a fun hang. And at the sessions, in between songs, I remember sort of sitting at Taylor's drums and he and I going back and forth about like our favorite group and our favorite records. And one of the last things I remember playing for him was a couple of beats from the Birds of Fire album by Mahavishnu.
Oh man.
we were tripping out over celestial terrestrial commuters. I don't know if you remember that one on Birds of Fire.
I know I've heard it. Yeah.
It's totally insane. And we had a good laugh, both of us tripping up over that.
Oh man, I didn't know him well, but he was such a student of the drums, you know,
Oh yeah, man.
and I could totally see that. And I forgot about that. I remember that now, and I'm so glad I had something to do with that and that you guys connected, because he's the kind of guy that, like, you know, he probably was such a huge fan of all your work. Like, I have to think when you guys connected, he was like, man, I loved you on the Sting record. I loved you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, well, he did share that with me, and he was really
yeah,
gracious about it. And again, and I'm a huge fan of their work. You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah.
Um, Taylor is a beast, and a great guy, and an incredible spirit for that band.
Yeah.
That band really took off when he got there. And not to mention Mr. Grohl himself, who is just a beast at the kit, and a fantastic songwriter, and arranger, and
Yeah.
producer himself. So, getting an opportunity to hang out with them, and share music, make music, hang, jam, that
Yeah.
that was cool. And yeah, and I like that part of kind of retaining your fan energy about music. And what I mean is staying excited about music.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about music as I did when I was 10 years old. I hear a record, and it freaks me out, and I get excited, and I get inspired, and you know what I mean? And I never
Yeah.
want to lose that feeling, you know what I mean, about music, and about the excitement of participating and in the business and making music, man.
Absolutely. No, I know that about you. I know. And you know, I just, you know, Taylor, just another thought on him. You know, again, I can't say that I knew him really well, but every time I ever spoke with him, or you know, emailed a few times after I left Zildjian, we stayed in touch a little bit, and he was such an old soul. You know,
Mm.
like, he just, for a guy that was, I mean, he, you know, rest his soul, he was only 50 when he passed, but
Mm.
like, going back 10 years ago or more, when he was in his 30s or maybe just 40, he had this great knowledge of guys. You know, you're not much older, but like the generation before him, he was
Oh yeah.
so, yeah, he was so dialed into it. And I remember like talking to him at NAMM shows where he'd be so, dude, you know, and he'd talk about like a record that you might be on, or that, you know, Roger Taylor, you know, a Queen record or something.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
No, he
like,
he had a tremendous respect for the history of rock and roll, and
yeah,
and
yeah,
and the guys who really were the building blocks of the sound, and the evolution of drums inside of that genre,
yeah.
and he embodied that at the gigs, and that dude had a lot of energy, man. I mean, the
Yeah.
last gig I saw him play with them was a few months before he died. Actually, it was September 2021. Dave called me and said, "We're playing in Connecticut. You got to come to this gig." And so I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm not going to miss it. Thanks for letting me know. I'm totally going to be there." And I woke up that morning not feeling good. I was kind of like out of it, and it was a crappy day. Weather was like a monsoon rains. I was like,
Oh,
"Rachel,
yikes.
I don't know if I've got the energy to deal with this." And then I got another text from Dave, "See you later." And I was like, "Okay, we got to rally. We got to rally. We're going to do this." And I'm glad I did, because we, like I said, the weather was awful, but we drove from New Jersey to Connecticut, and they met us at the backstage door, and it was great to see everybody. Still COVID happening, so we had to
Yeah.
take a COVID test to get in. But once we were in, man, it was a fun hang, and we were catching up as usual, and then I walked to the stage with those guys, and Rachel and I sat on the side and watched the gig. And when Taylor went out front to sing and Dave got on the drums, halfway through the song, I mean, they're jamming away on the Queen song that he loved. He
Yeah.
loved.
Yeah.
And so when it stops and it kind of breaks down for Dave to do a drum solo, Taylor goes on the mic, "Where's Omar?" And I was like, "Oh no, all right, it's a setup." And so they pulled me on stage, and it turned into this really lovely
Wow.
jam.
Wow.
And so in many ways, the fact that I woke up feeling crappy, but I rallied for that basically last time that I saw Taylor play live. I was like, "Oh man, what a
Wow.
night. What a night." And he was like phenomenal that night. It was really happening. So beautiful.
What a great story, man. What a great,
Mm.
I think, no, it wouldn't be the last time I saw him, but I remember in the 90s, like not long after he got the Foo Fighters gig, it would have been like late 90s, could have been early 2000s. They were opening for the Stones. And
Mm.
it was either in New Jersey or it might have been here in Boston. But
Yeah.
I went over, I saw Taylor backstage, and we'd met a few times before that when he was with Alanis Morissette,
Yeah.
and I went over and said hello to him, like reintroduced myself to him, and he was so funny. This is typical, he said something like, "Are you here to see Charlie?" And I said, "Yeah." And he thought that was so cool. Like he's like, "Oh, do you know him?" And I said, "Well, I know him a little bit." Yeah. He's like, "Oh man, that's so cool," And I'm thinking, dude, there are so many people out there right now that would love to meet you. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, I know, but he wouldn't hear any of it. He was like,
No,
"Man,
no.
that's so wow, Charlie. Oh man, I think he said something like, I talked to him the other day. He's really cool to me or something.
Yeah, of course, man.
What
No,
a
he was.
sweetheart.
Yeah, totally, totally, and
Yeah.
a wicked sense of humor, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was always fun hanging with those guys.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Omar. So we're live, and there are so many people watching, but
Oh,
especially some old friends of yours,
okay.
some of your Berklee folks, Eggy Castrillo,
Yeah,
Casey Sherrill, Skip
yeah,
Haddon,
Casey.
yeah, and Skip. You and Skip were our ex-Weather Report drummers, so
That's
you
right.
get that.
Weather Report alumni.
Yeah, Weather Report alums. So man, this is and everybody sends their love and lots of
Hey, man,
questions.
let me tell you something, man. That Berkeley crew. First of all, I want to send all of those guys a lot of love, man, because I wasn't there very long, but while I was there, I had the loveliest time.
Mm,
Um, Hanging with them, being with them, going to classes, observing their genius.
yeah.
It's a staff. The percussion faculty is like all geniuses in what they do, and you know, I remember going to some of those classes like, damn, I should enroll in this class.
Yeah, I know.
They're kicking some great information, and file that under. You never stop learning. You
Yeah,
never stop learning, man. And you get around these guys, and you're going to be inspired. And it's a beautiful environment for young drummers and young percussionists to participate in and to be a part of. It was just a fantastic experience. I just want to send love and hugs to
oh
all
man,
my buddies at Berklee, man. It was an
that's
awesome experience.
that's beautiful. Eggy says we love you, man. Yeah, I mean, I know I used to spend a lot of time there when I was working for Zildjian. I'd go up and sometimes sit in on their departmental meetings, and you're right. I mean, the staff, the faculty is like,
It's second to none, man.
second to none. Yeah,
Second to none. It's just
yeah,
really fantastic. And what can I say?
yeah. And just a great, a really well managed, run organization, school.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
top notch.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Ron Israel is rocking it up there, doing this thing,
yeah,
and captain of that ship. It's
yeah.
awesome.
That's great. Well, good. I just wanted to let you know they're out there, and they're here to see you because they don't often tune in. So
Great.
thank you.
All
Um,
right.
but man, so this is great. And I said this during the introduction. I'm just gonna say it's great that you're on this episode because this is like a year anniversary of my Modern Drummer Podcast Association collaboration. So
Oh, did that. Nice.
yeah, so I'm so glad you could be here today to be,
Oh,
the,
man.
the 1 year. Yeah.
Nice,
Um,
man.
I when I saw you at PASIC, whenever November, just a few months ago, yeah, seeing you play, Omar, it was like it brought back all these great memories of all different times that I've seen you, whether it's in clinics or live, and you're like the guy that is always, like you said at the beginning, the music you love, you're inspired by music, and you always, I won't say you change, but you grow with music. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like you're like
It
you
does make
embrace.
sense, and it's something that I try to be conscious of because I am acutely aware that I'm still learning and growing and evolving. Music is no different than you like doctors. You always hear doctors say they have a practice. You never hear doctors say, I have a job, or I have, they call it their medical practice, right?
Yeah.
Which so music is the same way. I have a music practice. What does that mean? That means that things are changing, things are evolving, technology comes and goes, but I'm still practicing this discipline of being a musician, being a drummer, being a professional participant in the industry. I'm sitting in my recording studio. A lot of people don't know. Now, I've been a recording engineer for most of my career, not just a drummer, but I'm also a composer. I'm a vocalist. I play little keyboards. I play a little guitar. Why? Because when being in the business for as long as I have been in the business, you learn to wear many hats, not only for your evolution, but for your survival. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because again, this is how I make my living. So what that means is that I need to pay attention. I need to keep growing. I need to keep that fire and that love. And the funny thing is, I would even say that I'm enjoying playing and making music now more than ever. And that's might be a weird thing to say.
No, it's
after 54 years in the business, but the truth is I'm not jaded about it. I'm very aware that it's a gift and a privilege, and so I approach it as such, man. And thank God, man. I'm still here. I'm healthy enough to keep whipping some drums and slinging some wood, and and making music and sharing.
And sharing, yeah.
And sharing.
All those things, though, you're right. I mean, you take great care of yourself physically, I know. And I remember the first time I met you and really got to hang out, I think I reminded you of this when I saw you at PASIC. You played at the 1989 PASIC in Nashville. And that was when I had just joined Zilch, and you were there with your group because you had just released your first solo record.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And we went out to a vegan Indian restaurant. I don't know if you remember. I think somebody told you about it, or we found out about it, and I'd just become a vet. I had stopped eating red meat anyway. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, and you were like, man, is it cool? Because I'm I'm vegetarian, I'm vegan, and I'm like, absolutely. And you got me out of the banquet, which was like the rubber chicken thing, so thank you again, 35 years later.
Those dang rubber chickens.
For bailing me out. But it was such a great hang and connection. And
I remember that. I remember Lenny DeMuzio sitting in the front.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Because we were there for a little while of it, and then we left. And Lenny and Armin were throwing, salad rolls at the guy giving speech. It was like they're just.
It was like a high school cafeteria.
Yeah, exactly. When you mentioned Lenny, when you were talking about something you said earlier about, oh man, I wish I remember. It was a few minutes ago. You said something about being here, for the time we have or something. And Lenny had this great saying. It just made me think of Lenny. And Lenny, his classic saying was, "We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time."
Oh, okay. I like that.
But it's great, right? I mean, it's
use that.
Yeah. he had a lot of good ones. But no, I was so like, it was, I admire that about you, Omar. I wish I could be more open, honestly, because I see that about you, that you're just like the same person you were, as a teenager, just soaking up all this new music. And I think that's really inspiring for people to, to watch, to understand that you need to be that way to do what you do.
Oh, there's no question about it, man. It's what I've discovered, and we've heard this before. It might be a little cliche, but it's not about the arrival. It's about the journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's about really enjoying the journey and being a part of the, like I said, the evolution and the learning that is going to continue. If you keep your mind open, though, you got to keep your mind open. You can't get to a place where you know it all, and you feel like you don't need to learn anything else, or there's no joy in that for me. You know what I mean? For me, the joy is in the process. That's I try to hold on to that. The joy is in the process.
That's great.
Of learning, practicing, writing music, listening, discovering. That is what keeps me going. And that drives me. And like I said, I'm still having fun. In fact, I could even say I'm having more fun than ever, man.
That's great. Yeah.
So that's what I would say to all of our friends out there. Stay connected to your joy. Don't let anybody take that from you. Stay connected to the joy. Remember why you started doing this in the first place. That is so important, man. Because when people are talking crap in your ears and, about your music or whatever, you just stay focused on why you started doing this to begin with. And remember that feeling when you heard your first favorite record, or you saw a drum set for the first time, or you picked up a guitar for the first time. If you stay connected to that, wow.
Man, that's great. Wow. Yeah. Yep. I got to tell you, sorry, I can't let this go by without telling you that Tane Watts is also in the house. Jeff, sending love and respect to you, brothers.
Oh, man.
Thanks for your inspiration and help over the years.
And he is a tremendous inspiration. Jeff Tane Watts is a genius.
He sure is, man.
He always blows my mind when I see him play. We love you, man. Holy crap. Yeah. That dude is
I know. I met Jeff and Smitty when they were at Berklee, when I was working at a music store around the corner in 1980. And they were going to school at Berklee, and then they're just old friends, and I love them both, man. Yeah.
I have great memories of hanging with Jeff and Kenny Kirkland in LA. They were doing the Tonight Show, but they'd get off, and there was a club that they would go to after the gig and play. I forgot. I want to say it was in a hotel somewhere. Maybe Jeff will type it in if there's a chat, the name of that hotel that they were playing at. And man, you talk about an adventure. They would get in that club and blow off some steam, man, and some of the musical moments that happened. And I miss Kenny Kirkland so much, man, because he was another one that was just phenomenal. He was a phenomenal musician.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to just jump backwards. You've probably talked about this 1,000 times in your life and other podcasts, but I'd just be curious to know. Oh, sorry. Tane says it was La Bellage in West Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Right. Exactly. Right. Man, some music happened at the Bellage.
Yeah.
It's probably never been the same after they got done with it, because it was really beautiful, beautiful moments, man. They took us all to school.
Yeah, I don't know that place. Wow. I wonder if it's still there. I hope it's still there.
I wonder too. It was part of a little chain of hotels that had like French names. There was a Le Mondrian, a Bellage. It was all these really hip little boutique hotels. But those were fun nights, man.
I'll bet.
Super fun night. Well,
I was going to just jump back to kind of when I first became aware of you, when you got the gig with Weather Report. 23 years old. And I'm always fascinated by somebody so young having a gig like that and having the ability to play so maturely at such a young age. I think I'm a year younger than you, and I think I could have never gotten the gig with Weather Report, but your ability to play that gig with the authenticity and the authority, and the confidence that you played it with, it fascinates me. And I think it fascinates everybody. And can I just ask, did you have to audition, or did Joe or Wayne know who you were? Were you recommended, or?
Okay, good question. So, well, let me talk about where I was at in my life and my career up until that point, because we're talking 82 when I got the call.
Yeah.
I started playing pro with my dad. His name was Hassan Hakim. He was a trombone player. And my dad played with people like Duke Ellington and Count Basie. He left home at 16 years old with Louis Armstrong's big band. So I grew up in the jazz language, if you will.
Yeah.
Even though the kids my age were listening to Motown and James Brown and Sly and Earth, Wind and Fire and all of that. So simultaneously, I'm getting a diet of the jazz language, playing with my dad and hanging out with his friends, and some of who were like people like John Coltrane. I remember going to Train's house as a kid. I remember going to Art Blakey's apartment in Harlem. My dad was friends with all these cats. There was a club in Queens, in Jamaica, Queens, called the Club Ruby. They had a Sunday jazz brunch, and I remember going there. They would do it outside if the weather permitted, and you would see people like Horace Silver and Elvin and McCoy, and it was part of the jazz circuit. They'd come out to Jamaica, Queens to this Club Ruby, man. I saw Rahsaan Roland Kirk there. So on one hand, I'm doing that with my dad. On the other hand, I'm playing with local funk and rock bands. And so I grew up with this really interesting balance of what I was getting from the tradition and the language of jazz from my dad and his colleagues, and then what was going on the radio, everything from the Beatles to, the disco era, right? And so my young mind was a sponge of all of this music, and it was all becoming a part of how I felt and thought and dealt with music. I did my first tour. So that was at 10 years old with my dad. By the time I was 15, I did my first tour of America. We were the band leader's name was Jay Mason. The band was called the Jay Mason Group. He had a deal with Buddha Records. It was being produced by a producer named Stan Vincent, who produced another famous R&B group called the Five Stairsteps.
Oh, of course. Ooh Child. Ooh, Child.
Exactly. Ooh Child.
Oh,
Things are gonna get easier.
Love that song. Right? Yeah.
Me too. So here I am on the road, 15 years old. We're opening for, like, I remember doing East Coast dates with Albert King and his band, which was off the hook. I mean, that's where I learned how to play the proper shuffle.
Yeah, man.
Because those boys were shuffling it up, boy. It was awesome. But we were also opening for like Hall & Oates, this new band called Hall & Oates.
Right. Okay. Totally Hall & Oates. Yeah.
And Sha Na Na, which was like a 50s kind of comedy act.
Review.
And there was another all woman band called Isis. And then there was and then on the West Coast, we did some gigs with Sarita Wright, who was the wife of Stevie Wonder. She was a great songwriter. And we also did gigs with a band from the Bay Area called Cold Blood. Do you remember Cold Blood?
Cold Blood. That sounds really did they have a song maybe?
Yeah, you need to know about Cold Blood. Okay. I would say Cold Blood is a little bit before Tower of Power.
Okay.
And maybe a couple of the cats from Cold Blood ended up in Tower of Power.
So they're a horn band, like a funk.
They were a horn band, but they had that funk and that, they were ridiculous, man.
Cold Blood, okay. Yeah.
Cold Blood, and it's interesting. A little thing about Cold Blood, there was a drummer in that band who was ridiculous. His name was Sandy McKee. And I've been looking for more information on Sandy McKee. Tower of Power came through, and it was my opportunity to ask them about Sandy McKee.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Sandy McKee? But yeah, you need to check him out, because there was a song called Shop Talk. Hold on, let me just do a quick look up. Might as well.
Roy Brown is saying Cold Blood, love them. Lydia Pence is a great singer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Pre-TOP. Yeah.
but I'm gonna see
Wow.
if I can find the name of this album.
Man, I got to check these guys out.
Because it's important. Drummers should hear this.
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, no, I can't find it. So Tower comes to town. They played in Brooklyn. So I cornered Garibaldi, right? And I was like, man, did you know Sandy McKee? And he goes, yeah, of course, Omar. I knew Sandy McKee. He had mentioned that he had died a few years prior to that. And he said what was unusual about Sandy was that he was the only drummer that I ever saw play with the hi-hat underneath the snare drum.
Oh, man.
Instead of the hi-hat being over the snare,
Yeah.
it was lower than the snare so that he had all the space for the backbeat. And so Garibaldi kind of gave me this picture of like his setup. And then I thought about it. I was like, that makes sense because the way some of the things that I heard him do, I was like, there's something going on, you know, the way he would grab. So you got to find Shop Talk because there's a drum solo in Shop Talk. And in Jamaica, Queens, there were a few drummers, you know, who figured out how to play Shop Talk. There was this one friend of mine named Howie Great. And Howie Great was the drummer for a band called the Firebolts. They were like, they just scared the crap out of everybody whenever they come, right? They were ridiculous. and they would do Shop Talk. And Howie could play the solo. So then all the little drummers were like, okay, I got to learn how to play Shop Talk.
I'm going to be downloading some music when we're done.
Yeah. So I don't, man. But anyway, I was talking about touring. So yeah, you know, people like that, you know, it was really amazing to be that young out on the road doing those things. So by the time I got to Weather Report, I was already 12 years into my career, recording, touring as a teenager. You know, I'd been busy. And when I graduated high school in 77, Marcus Miller and I got really busy together. He went to Music and Art High School as well. And we started doing a lot of work together after that. And one of the things we did was Tom Brown's Funkin' for Jamaica album. I think the album was actually called Love Approach, but the hit was Funkin' for Jamaica, New York.
Was that your first record, Omar? Or was that your first like?
No, it wasn't my first records. Well, commercially released was something that I did for that first guy I worked with, Jay Mason, on Buddha Records, produced by Stan Vincent. He took me. He liked my drumming, and he took me in. He started taking me around to do record dates with him, which blew my mind. And one of the dates was something at Sigma Sound in Philly. So, you know, imagine hearing, you know, the sound of Philadelphia, TSOP, and all of those records, and then ending up at Sigma Sound at 16 years old kind of blew my mind. And around this time, we also did a record. It was like a one-hit wonder thing that Stan put together. The band, he called the band Harlem River Drive. And we had this #1 R&B song called I Need You, which I recently saw on YouTube. Somebody put it up. I Need You by Harlem River Drive. I was 16 when we made that record. Went to #1 on the charts.
Wow.
And it's funny because it was an early release on Arista. It was one of, you know, Arista was relatively new at this moment. And Clive Davis gave us money to go back in the studio and do a follow-up, which completely eluded us. We never came up with that second single or anything. But what did happen was I got a lot of time in the studio, and that studio was the Hit Factory, New York City. And the Hit Factory had a chief engineer named Ed Sprigg. And Ed Sprigg was something else, and he really liked Harlem River Drive a lot, and he wanted to record the band himself. You know, the chief engineers don't have to do that, right? So he must have really dug us. So Eddie Germano, the owner of the studio, gave us the night shift after a while to keep working on our music. Sprigg would stay and work with us. And it was Ed that I would sit with I mean, it's because in a way, it's because of him that I'm kind of into
Yeah,
like recording, because
I'll
with
bet.
him, I learned about aligning tape decks and analog tape and, getting into all of that. And so my sort of obsession with studio gear started during those days of recording at the Hit Factory.
Wow.
And I had another friend, who also is a recording engineer, a guy named Fountain Jones, who is now like an Emmy Award-winning technical director at CBS Television, but he too was sort of a part of that journey. But anyway, back to Weather Report, because I know I'm going in different directions.
No, this is great, man. Are you kidding? This is great.
Yeah, but so by the time I get to Weather Report, I'm 12 years under my belt of touring, recording. I had just come off the road for my first Europe tour with Gil Evans Orchestra, Gil Evans
Okay.
Big Band, I should say.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was quite an experience. The band, Hiram Bullock was in that band. Pete Levin played keyboards, Tony Levin's brother.
Yeah.
Hannibal Marvin Peterson on trumpet, Lou Soloff on trumpet, David Sanborn would dip in and out. Did I mention Hiram Bullock already?
Yes. Yeah.
On guitar. Luico Hopper played bass. When he wasn't on bass, Tom Barney played bass. Yeah, it was like, it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, man.
When we got off the plane in Europe, Gil handed everybody a Eurail pass, and that's how we traveled around Europe with this Eurail train pass. And Gil was like, "Okay, when the train pulls in, you gotta get your stuff on the train as fast as you can. Throw everything on, or else the train is gonna leave."
And they do.
You're throwing the stuff on. All
They're
right,
on
you
time.
don't forget that. Grab that guitar, the horn case. Whose suitcase is that? Grab that.
Talk about being inducted into the whole,
Hey,
yeah, travel.
yeah, man, it was awesome,
recording.
man, and a great way to see Europe.
Yeah.
And so when I get home, I get a call. And actually, I was holed up in the basement at my parents' house, because I figured I'm on tour. It doesn't make any sense for me to get an apartment in New York, because if I do, I come home and all my stuff is gonna be gone. So
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm holed up in the basement. That's my all my gear was down there. So for the few months out of the year I was home, I would chill there, and then until the next tour. So I'm out. A call comes in. My mom picks up the phone, takes the message. So I call in. Mom, any messages? She said, yeah, there's a guy called here from LA. He had a funny name. He said it started with a Z, and he said something about a weather report. That was the message. And I'm saying, and then while she's saying this, I'm putting it together. Okay, because LA starts with a Z, says something about weather report. Zawano. I said, Mom. Then I'm like, do you have the number? She said, oh, it's around here, baby. I'll find it. It's around here. So I'm like, Mom, you gotta find that. You gotta find that message. So she finds it, and I call. And sure enough, it's Zawano,
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty amazing. So word is that he and Wayne actually called a few people in New York to get a recommendation on drummers. And the three people they called were Miles, Gil, who I just come off the road with, and Michael Urbaniak. And lucky for me, all three of those guys said my name. There's a kid in New York, you need to hear him. And so I would have to thank those three people for getting me a gig. And I didn't have to audition. Basically, Joe and Wayne were like, okay, you're in. And can you put us in touch with your buddy Marcus? Because they wanted me, because Marcus and I were like a team. We were doing stuff with Sanborn and this one and that one. So they were like, put us in touch with Marcus. You think Marcus would want to do this with you? And I was like, I'll ask him. Now, I knew that Marcus had already started working with Miles. And Marcus and I talked about it. And he was like, no, I'm doing this thing with Miles. I'm good. I think he was starting to get involved more with production with Miles. He saw that coming. And so right before I got to LA to actually meet with them, I was doing gigs with Hugh Masekela, the African trumpet player, and Miriam Makeba. And on bass was this guy from Philadelphia named Victor Bailey. And I was like, I knew Vic because he was friends with Bobby Broom, and I used to see him at Music and Art with Poogie Bell. But we hadn't really played together. And I had been in the band with Hugh on another tour. So when I came home, Hugh had some new cats. Victor was in the band. And I noticed when Victor and I played together, we had a fantastic chemistry.
Yeah.
And I remember jamming at a sound check. And as Victor and I would start kind of exploring and it would get long, people would start leaving the stage, and then it would just be me and Vic just going at it. And then I thought, I should really introduce Vic to Joe and Wayne. Yeah. So I said to Victor, dude, what do you think about like auditioning for Weather Report? And Victor was like, oh, are you kidding me? I would love to do that, blah, blah, blah. So I told Joe about Vic. Vic said, have him send me a tape. So, back then it was a cassette, right? So Victor sends a cassette out to LA. Joe loved it. And then I got my buddy Jose Rossi to play percussion. And I met Jose in like 75 or 76. He was the percussionist for a group called La Belle. La Belle was Patti LaBelle's group that had a huge hit called Lady Marmalade.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so I ended up subbing for their drummer. Like I said, I would have been, about 16 years old. And so I met Jose Rossi and we hit it off. So I always remembered that experience of jamming, with this amazing percussionist, Jose. So I pulled in Victor Bailey and Jose Rossi into Weather Report, and then we made a record called Procession.
Yes, yeah.
And actually we did Domino Theory right after that. And then after that, Mino Senelu joined the band. So yeah, was I ready? I was very ready because like I said, I had already been 12 years into playing, touring, recordings, but I also grew up with this very interesting balance of language, of musical language, if you will, because on one hand, I had jazz over here, but I had the rock and the funk, the R&B and the stamina to play, kind of music that required facility, but with the energy that they needed. Because Weather Report, I mean, if you hadn't been to a Weather Report gig, they were like a loud jazz band. You know what I mean?
Man, absolutely.
It was serious. It was like, you had to dig in with these cats. So, but at the same time, you had to be able to connect the evolution of where Joe and Wayne were coming from with where they were at when they formed that band into where they were trying to go with it, which was the blend of world music and jazz and interesting harmony. There were all kinds of influences there. I mean, we're talking about two incredible composers. God rest the soul of Wayne Shorter. That has been tough. I'm still digesting the death of my inspiration. Wayne was an incredible musician, artist, beacon, architect. I can go on. I got a chance to spend some time with him. Every time Rachel and I would go to LA in the last couple of years, we would never leave LA without going to Wayne's house and hanging out with he and Carolina, and giving him lots of hugs and smooches and all that good stuff. And because it was, what I learned in my time with Wayne and Joe was 3 tours and 3 albums in 3 years or 3.5 years of Weather Report. And then actually I did another tour with Wayne after that with Herbie Hancock and Stanley Clarke, like in the early 90s. these were beautiful times.
Yeah.
With me. I kind of remember I was kind of an early riser, on those tours back then. And I remember Wayne would also be up. So we would have breakfast a lot together. And we would talk about life. We never talk about music in the sense that most cats talk about music. Wayne wanted to talk about life and love and living and spirituality and books and movies and family, and it was interesting to spend those mornings with him walking the streets of Italy and just looking in the stores and talking about stuff. And I have a lot of beautiful memories of that. And it's funny because when you spend that much time with a cat, what you get, or what I got, is that it was no different hearing Wayne play his horn and hearing him speak as a human being. That, like, I recognized the same process of thought and emotion. And it was really interesting because it was almost like, I know what he's talking. I'm listening to him and I'm going, I know what he's talking about right now. Mm. But he's playing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
I could feel him, his emotion, and it was really beautiful to. It was like, well, there's something to aspire to, like that you're playing, your expression is so connected to who you are as a person that you can, you don't need words all the time. You can just use notes and breath. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, that was heavy.
That you have to think somebody that played with so much soul had a huge soul, Yeah, I totally know what you mean, Omar. Yeah, man. Yeah. What a blessing, right? I mean, to have those memories that you have, I mean, just that's, you can hold those forever. And, and the great thing about those kinds of memories is, even though guys our age can't remember what we had for lunch yesterday, that you'll never forget that, right?
That is true, man.
Yeah.
That's real. That's real. And, and he and Joe, they and Herbie, I mean, they are the cats that took the evolution, like, when, to be a kid, to be 10 years old, 12 years old, and hear those guys for the first time, especially coming from what I was doing with my dad.
Yeah.
And then along comes Herbie, Wayne, Tony, Ron, right? Miles.
Yeah.
And then fusion. There was a lot of exploration going on, and a lot of people want to kind of dismiss that period as not being jazz, but I don't think that's fair, because really it was young people using the instruments of that moment to further their improvisational exploration. So we're still doing it. In other words, the most dangerous thing that we can do is pass a judgment on the form that evolution takes. You have to be willing to just go with this. You don't need to agree. Yeah. Actually, we don't need you to, we don't even need you to agree. It's happening with or without you.
Yeah. But go along with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's happening. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And so the beauty of that is that, if you're open, you will be able to connect those dots. You'll be able to connect those dots. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so for critics to actually, instead of draw a line, or connect those dots too, that they want to try to make the dots go over that and then continue. But no, you got to keep the dots going right through that period, because what Herbie wrote and what Wayne wrote during that period, what Joe wrote, that is just as important as anything that happened between 1940 and 1967, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? It's part of the evolution. So
part of the evolution, absolutely.
It's part of the evolution, and all of this is important to me, and it informed me, because those were kind of like my formative years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's great. man. And so you were in Weather Report for about 3.5 years, you said. But during that
Yeah.
time, like 83, things just really started to take off with session work, or maybe it even started before then. But again, this is my recollection is getting the call to do David Bowie's Let's Dance. And was that through Nile Rodgers? Like had you known Nile for a while at that point?
Oh yeah, Nile and
Yeah.
I had been friends. I met Nile when I was like 11 or 12 years old,
Oh my
man.
gosh. Okay. That far
We
back.
were
Yeah.
we were attending the Jazzmobile workshop in Harlem. My dad used to take me there because they had free lessons for the kids.
Yeah.
And one of the drum teachers there was Freddie Waits.
Wow.
And then they had a big band for the kids, and Nile was in the big band. And so I remember meeting him back there. And then Nile and I had a band. You ever go to these amusement parks and then you see these band shell bands?
Oh yeah.
They're like
Sure.
cover
Yeah.
bands.
Yeah.
Okay, so me and Nile, we had a cover band at Great Adventures Amusement Park in New Jersey in like it must have been like 75. And the band was called Brown Sugar. It was 3 girls out front singing. They were like the Supremes. And we would do covers of whatever the R&B songs of the day were. So the 3 girls were singing, I was singing from the drums, Nile on guitar, Denzel Miller, incredible keyboard player, and Denzel Miller on keyboards, and this cat named Rick Tell on bass. And that was our summer gig. And so interesting, after his buddy, Nile's buddy, Bernard Edwards, would come to the park with him from time to time and hang out. The incredible funky bassist. And he, because they had an after hours gig after the park.
I dig. Okay.
A lot of the band would stay at the park. They gave us like a little motel to stay at. But Nile and Bernard would go to the city and do their midnight to 6 a.m. gig. And then he'd come back to the park the next day. So after we finished that summer, Nile and Bernard said to me, Omar, we're going to Paris. And we're starting a new band. We're going to Paris. You should come. And I said, oh, wow, that sounds like fun. I really want to go. But I just auditioned to get into music and art high school. And I don't want to be a dropout before I get there. So you guys go ahead, have fun. I'll see you when I get back. And 18 months later, I hear on the radio, yowza, 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 dance, 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 their first smash.
Oh, man.
I'm kind of kicking myself in the halls. I should have gone to Paris with these guys. What were you thinking? But anyway, I mean, I'm half joking because I was like, wow, that was amazing. And one of my buddies, a keyboard player, Raymond Jones, was in the group. And Raymond was also from Queens. So I used to hang out with Raymond all the time. Mm. And so one day I was in the city around 1979, walking down the street. I hadn't seen Nile in a while. I'm walking like east. He's walking west. We're passing each other in front of Carnegie Hall.
Oh,
and I go, Nile, Omar. And I'm like, dude, congratulations. Because by this time he had had a few hits and I hadn't seen him in a while. And Le Freak was like #1. I mean, it was like an incredible moment. I said, Nile, this is amazing, man. Congratulations. This is amazing. And he was like, yeah, man, it's just been a blessing and really incredible. He goes, Omar, next week, he said, I'm going to be a billionaire next week because I'm getting my royalty check for Le Freak, for, the big hit single. Yeah, and I was like, dude, this is amazing. It's like when one of your friends blows up on that level, and it's a big deal. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so we're standing on the street talking. And I said, where you headed, man? And he said, I'm going to Atlantic Studios right now because we're mastering our new single. And I said, dude, can I tag along? He said, yeah, come on. So we kept talking and we're walking, Carnegie Hall is like 7th Avenue, 57th Street, and Atlantic Studios at the time was at Columbus Circle in like 59th or 60th Street or whatever. So I walk over with him and we get in the mastering room. The engineer's name was Dennis King, I think, great mastering engineer. And I hear this song that they're mastering. And I'm thinking, dang, man, this one is better than the last one. And so, you know, I'm watching him cut because he was mastering the vinyl, which was it's a really interesting process to watch. Yeah. And I said to Nile, dude, I think this one is better than the last one. The record was called Good Times. Yeah, and the rest of you, and any Chic fan that knows Good Times is like the basis of a bunch of hit records that came out after it. And, you know, I mean, so many bands bit off of the Good Times groove, you know. Another one bites the dust.
Yes, of course.
The take on Good Times, you know.
Yeah.
Then it was kind of like the blueprint for hip hop and the MCs. I mean, that record went nuts. And I was there listening to it being mastered, and it just blew my mind that day. I was like, okay, Nile is gone. So fast forward a little bit, the Chic thing kind of winds down. He's become like the producer.
Yeah.
And I'm on tour with Weather Report. I'm on tour. He calls me and says, hey man, I've got to do a session with Bowie. And Tony and Bernard aren't available for whatever reason. Are you going to be around next week? And I'm like, actually, I'm on my way home. We have a gig at the Beacon Theater, and then after that, I'll be home for like 2 weeks. So perfect timing. And so we go in the studio and at the power station, and the first song we cut was Let's Dance. That was the first. That's how we started the session.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Had you, can I ask you, when you got to, had you not heard the song until you got there? I
didn't hear anything until I got there. Some
scratch demo kind of thing. And
yeah, maybe there might have been a demo, but the demos were more like guitar vocal demos. They weren't really like, you know, wasn't like today where, you know, there's a drum loop and you know what I mean? There's a song. Nile had an idea for a rhythm concept. He started playing his guitar part. Me and the bass player Carmine Rojas started jamming with him, and then this thing starts morphing into the pattern. It's, you know.
Yeah.
Very interesting,
man. And were you basically did you know you'd be doing the whole record at that point?
I didn't.
It's such I'm just I need technology. What a kick-ass track, man. When you cut that track, Omar, was David Bowie in the studio? Was he there to, like, when the rhythm tracks were cut?
Yeah, David was really fun because, you know, David wasn't one of these singers that wanted to wait for the rhythm track to be done and then he come in and do his vocals. David was like, set me up a mic right now. I'm gonna sing with the guys. Wow. And that was key because I think what it does is it gives the musicians in the studio an opportunity to hear the artist's intent for the song very clearly.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about this pattern that Carmine and I came up with, it's not the typical 2-bar pop record pattern. It's not even the typical 4-bar pattern. It is probably one of the first 8-bar patterns on a pop record. It's actually an 8-bar phrase.
Yeah.
And so it took us a moment once we figured out the kind of puzzle of it. that we were able to get it rolling. And then the challenge after that, after you get this 8-bar puzzle figured out, is to play it continuously.
Yeah.
To
And
keep
it resolves itself basically.
It
Right?
resolves itself after 8 bar,
Yeah.
but you got to keep it, because again, the discipline of grooving is to play the cymbals in the right place, play the drum fills in the right place.
Oh,
You don't want
yeah.
to interrupt the motion of the thing. And if you do, any drum fill needs to move it along. It either needs to move it along or it needs to turn the page to the next verse or whatever. Is how I always looked at it.
Perfectly explained. And that explains so much about that song, because what might appear to people to be a kind of simple groove, it's another one of those classic, deceptively not so, I mean, the sticking in what you're playing, obviously, but the way you place all the beats, it's genius. It's genius. Absolutely, the way that all moves.
It was a fun hang, and Dave and Nile, they gave us the time. We took the time to really create these special elements. I didn't know, Nile hired me for like 2 or 3 days in a row. While I was there, I cut Let's Dance, Modern Love, China Girl, Ricochet, maybe 1 or 2 others. And then I was out of there. And then Tony came in and played on some tracks too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great experience. David asked me to go on the road with him, but I had already been committed to Weather Report, and I didn't want to. I mean, the David Bowie thing was, of course, paying a lot more than the Weather Report at the time, because he was a huge rock star, a huge pop star.
Yeah,
but my heart was still a Weather Report for the music and for the legacy and for the and for what I understood was going to be an investment in time, creative, from a creative place. It's just that, the way Weather Report was featuring my drumming wasn't going to be the same as on the David Bowie show. The David Bowie show, which was a fabulous show. I went to see the Serious Moonlight tour. It was incredible, but when you have an opportunity to play with Joe and Wayne and and these guys, I was, I think I'm going to do this a little longer, and ultimately I'm glad about that decision. And it's when I said no to the tour, I never thought I'd hear from David again after that. But actually, when he got off the road, he called me up and said, "I'm doing another record. I need you to come back to the studio with me." I was surprised to get the call, because I thought it was over, but we went back in the studio. This time, not at Power Station. We worked at Le Studio in Montreal, which was the studio of the band Rush.
Yes, yeah.
And we cut the Tonight album, which had the hit Blue Jean.
Yes.
With another track on there called Neighborhood Threat that was kind of fun. And Blue Jean was a minor hit. It wasn't as big as the Let's Dance album, but it was nice to have that opportunity to get back in the studio with David and have fun with Carlos Alomar and the crew.
Do you find now, looking back at that time in your life, the fact that you were surprised, I'll bet now if you think about it, you realize you did the right thing. You know what I mean? I have to think maybe David respected that you'd made a commitment to Joe and Wayne, and you couldn't really, they probably would have understood if you said, "Man, I got this opportunity to go out on the road with David Bowie," but you didn't. And I have to think your playing obviously speaks for itself, that David didn't take it personally at all the way you might have thought he would, and he just went, "Oh well, timing didn't work out."
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I thought, because anybody else would have looked at me and said, "David Bowie just offered you 5 times the amount of money Weather Report paid."
Yeah.
Like, it's, but I think I understood something. I said, because there are some things that money can't buy, right? There's some things that, you know what I mean? And I think the experience of being with those guys and what I learned from them musically and how it expanded my drumming and
it's huge.
and how it expanded my composition awareness.
Yeah.
because I remember bringing music to those cats, and it was interesting to have Joe and Wayne rip apart your composition and explore the harmony, and like, and it to this day, like, if I write a melody and I'm working on something like an instrumental piece, even to this day, I start off with like the first set of harmony, but then a couple of days later, I'll go back, I'll leave that melody in place, but then I'll start to play around with other harmonic ideas behind that melody. And I think I learned that from Joe and Wayne, because those two guys are like the masters. They were the masters,
At
and
composition, absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, that was, I think I just understood the importance of art first, I guess, on a certain level, and the experience, and
again, that's a great example, Omar, of your maturity for being still a young guy, but like having that instinct to go, you know what, this is going to be great for me. This is great for forming my musical personality, playing with these guys.
absolutely.
And what do you know? It turns out you ended up playing on a billion more pop records in your future, which,
It's true. I mean, it was weird. And then the next year, I ended up with Sting. And so, the so-called payday happened sort of later on, but it still happened, right? I mean, and that vibe, that thing that got created with Sting was also really beautiful and really fun. And, we made some good money that year, those 2 years.
Yeah.
It's a special time when you get in a project like that that's successful,
That was groundbreaking is how I would describe it. It really was. It was like Sting's first band outside of the Police, an incredible record. Yeah, I mean, it was
beautiful experience, man. And playing with my buddies, that first band of Branford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland on keyboards, Darryl Jones on bass. Man. Yeah, Sting didn't even play bass on that tour. That's Darryl Jones of the Rolling Stones on bass.
What a band. Yeah.
And Sting on guitar. He's a great guitar player.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had, and Dolette McDonald, and Janice Pendarvis, the background singers. It was lovely band, man. It was just a beautiful experience.
I was just going to jump back for 1 second and play another David Bowie song from Let's Dance that you mentioned. And this is, to me, such a killing drum track. I just got to play it.
I know when to go out, know when to stay in.
This has got that kind of urgency, that sort of almost like ahead of the beat, on top of the beat kind of feel to it. So much energy in the groove. And these weren't cut to a click track, Omar. These are all live in the studio. I mean, yeah. I'm going to just skip ahead to a couple of what I call Omar fills. Toward the end where you play those syncopated I played this song in the top 40 man when this was on the radio. It's one of my favorite songs to play. Man, it's got to feel good to know that you made this kind of a mark in music. You know, I mean, you've played on some. I mean, these are, I mean, like the tip of the iceberg, obviously, and songs you've played.
It's
But
funny to hear that again because what I'm reminded of is that that groove sounds like we're leaning forward the whole record, like the whole record is like this,
yeah, yeah,
leaning on the, and it's funny because in order to create that hype, and here's the other thing about a record like that, which is like when you think about the other work that I was doing, like with Weather Report, and it's so different. The playing on that record, that's like most people that had heard me with Weather Report would have never imagined that that's the same guy.
yeah,
But because I grew up playing rock and roll as a kid, you know, I was playing as much rock and roll as a kid as I was playing funk and jazz. So that the language of rock, the sound of rock was in my ears as well. So that's why I was always really comfortable to kind of go wherever musically, and the decision to not market myself as one type of drummer
yeah,
was a conscious one, because I never wanted people to say he's a jazz drummer or he's a rock drummer or he's a funk drummer, or
yeah, yeah,
what I wanted more people to say was he's a worthy collaborator. I wanted to make myself a worthy musical collaborator so that if they called, I would have an opportunity to make a contribution to the music. Now, whether it's jazz or rock or reggae or funk or whatever, I don't care. We'll figure that out. But what's interesting about the rock thing is that, you know, I always had to go into the studio and I had to almost reconfigure my drum set to get that sound, because, you know, the drum tuning, the cymbals and everything that I would use with Weather Report would be very different from what I need to bring to the studio with me to make a David Bowie record. You know, everything, the way the drums are tuned and the type of drum heads and the fact that I have to play harder and dig in and get that sound. Whereas Weather Report, the dynamic range would start here and go there. You know what I mean? But the David Bowie thing needed to be like a freight train wide open going down the tracks. You know what I mean? And so it's fun to hear that song because I'm reminded. And again, if you notice this, there are a few drum fills here and there, but it's the urgency of that groove. Exactly. And the fact that I'm kind of playing the same thing all the way through it. You know, cymbals in that case are like an exclamation point to me.
Yeah.
You know, I drop a cymbal and it's the exclamation point. Bang! Whoa! You know what I mean? It moved it. It creates an exciting burst of something that, you know, that kind of jolts the listener and kind of keeps this thing moving forward. And so, you know, I think maybe I'm always looking for like the drama in the simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's when I'm doing records like that, it's like, where is it? Okay, it's such a simple, it's just a rock beat. No, it's not a rock beat, because it's not just that, because if you find that thing that moves it along, that makes it exciting, that gives it energy. And I always say that grooves, people always talk about, well, what is a groove? What is a groove? What does that mean? What I think it is the power of repetition, right? I think that in the practice of meditation, you have something called a mantra. And in Buddhism or whatever, you know, you pick the discipline, pick the spiritual practice. There's a mantra, you repeat it, it gets energy. And if you notice, these mantras are the same thing over and over again. But as they get repeated, they get energy and they get bigger and stronger. And so to me, grooves are like that. Mm-hmm. It's like if you take a snowball, you're at the top of a mountain, you take a snowball and you roll it down the mountain. Well, while it's going down the mountain, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's picking up more snow, right? And by the time it gets to the bottom, it's a giant boulder of snow, right?
Yeah.
But it started off as a little snowball. Right?
Yeah.
So to me, a groove, the power of the groove is in the repetition. It's in the discipline. You know, so
Exactly.
don't play a fill.
Yeah. Yep.
If you play something, it has to have a purpose. If it doesn't have any purpose, just don't throw it in there. Make sure did you move the verse along? Did you compliment the singer? Did you respond to something the bass player did? Is this thing, whatever you're adding to it, is it in the motion and the emotion of the groove of the song and of the intention?
Yeah. And that song, I would say, I played that, in my younger days, and the challenge was always to have that energy that you have with it, and to have that drive, but not rush the tempo. I mean, anybody can, especially me, can speed up. That's easy. It's the way you play it, keeping the time, the groove solid, but having that sense of urgency throughout it is like, again, it's masterful. It really is.
No, that's why I said, even hearing it now, it felt like everybody was leaning forward. You weren't playing faster, but everybody was like that, that urgency,
Yeah.
And so it's really, it's a fun thing to hear many years later.
And the fills that you play, as you said, they set up the chorus. Like as you finish the verse, you play these great syncopated fills that just perfectly complement where David comes back to the chorus, and it's never, never in the way of the vocal of like,
the
melody
at the end of the day,
song.
It's about the story and it's about the singer.
Yeah.
I mean, as musicians, as session players, I mean, so many cats are like, where's the chart? Where's this? Can I see the music? Sometimes I go and I want to see the lyric sheet, man. What are we talking about here? What's the intention?
Yeah. There's
and maybe
so many...
that's because I'm a songwriter too, but I think about music like that,
Yeah. I was going to say, there's so many examples. I just want to play one more quick. I had a few here, but I know I'm keeping you a long time, but this came out not long afterward. One of my favorite songs, I've told you over the years that we've known each other, I come back to the song because your playing is so, I'll use the word understated, but yet it's so tasteful and perfect. And it's a great example of like, you'd almost think it's a different drummer because you're so relaxed, just like on the beat or even maybe a little behind it. And it's just,
Here I am again in this mean old town.
and those little
And you're so far away.
accents on the hi-hat are beautiful.
And where are you when the sun goes down? You're so far away from me. You're so far away from me. So far I just can't see. You're so far away from me. You're so far from me. I'm tired of being in love and being all
I'm going
alone.
to just skip ahead a little bit here, Omar.
When you're so far away
As you get to the
from me.
fade,
You're so far away from me. All right. You're just so far away from me.
now I know on that record, Brothers in Arms, you were called in to replace Terry Williams' tracks, right? Basically, you were.
I
to
was.
do that.
That's right.
And were you given pretty much like, did you listen to what he played and did they ask you to play something similar, or did they give you kind of free reign to go,
No,
do it your
I
way?
did get some free reign. That was an interesting session because the engineer was a friend of mine from the Power Station Studios, a guy named Neil Dorfsman. And Neil and I had been doing quite a few sessions together at Power Station. In fact, I pulled Neil in on the recording of Weather Report's Procession album. Did a great job on that record, but made a lot of records with Neil. So Neil, they were in Montserrat at Air Studios.
Right. Something
happened. The drummer had to get sent back to London, and Neil calls and says, like at 2 I get a call at like 2 a.m. In New York, can you come to Montserrat tomorrow? Like, wow. And I had heard about Montserrat only because I knew that's where the Police did all of their records.
Yeah.
I was familiar with the island studio that the Beatles producer George Martin owned. It was like, wow, this sounds like an incredible place. And I also knew that Luther Vandross recorded a record there, that really beautiful record, one of my favorites of his. So I was like, have an opportunity to work there was going to be fun. So when I got there, it was just me and Neil, the bass player, and Mark Knopfler. And basically a lot of the tracking was just guitar and drums, because he has a very specific feel.
Yeah.
On guitar, rhythm guitar. So it's funny on that song, it's once again, I'm trying to not be in his way, but I'm trying to move things along.
Yeah.
Without, because really rhythmically he's leading the feel of the record. It's, like even Money for Nothing is a very specific guitar riff. You know what I mean? And
absolutely. Yeah.
And you don't need the drummer to clutter up what Mark Knopfler does naturally. I need to dance in and out of that.
Yeah.
It's funny, even the first verse, going into that first verse, I noticed instead of playing a fill, it was just a hi-hat going, pss, pss.
Yeah.
And then it goes into because I was like, all right, well, I got to stay out of the way. Here comes the verse. And it's funny, little things like that. And I like the you're staying out the way, but then there's the humor of it a little bit. There's a lot of little things that I'm looking for that, that, like I always say, I keep saying this, move the record along. It moves the record along in a way that's tasty. It's not pulling us out of the groove or out of this flow that's happening. You know what I mean? So Mark was really special because his style of playing rhythm guitar is uniquely his. Nobody plays like that.
Yeah.
So it's really about going in and framing his thing,
Yeah.
What he
and was it through that record that Sting kind of discovered you? Is that how the connection with him singing on Money for Nothing? And
it's even deeper than that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the day that we cut Money for Nothing, Sting was on the island on holiday with his wife, Trudy. And they came by the studio that night for dinner. So I was doing something with the drums, and then I came out and they were already sitting at this kind of long dinner table. And I'm at the other end, and they're talking about Sting leaving the Police and starting a new solo record. So my ears perk up. And I told the story many times. I'm sure people have heard it before, but he starts saying how he's in New York and he's been talking to Branford Marsalis, and he's got to call in to Darryl Jones. Branford's bringing Kenny Kirkland. And I'm like, whoa, all my buddies here. So
my pals.
I go down the table. I go, well, you found your drummer. One of my friends, right? I'm going, you found your drummer. And they look at me like, and then Mark says, oh, I forgot to introduce you guys. Sting, meet Omar. Omar meets Sting. And Sting looks at me and he goes, "You're Omar Hakim?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "My manager is in New York looking for you right now." Isn't that
Oh my!
weird?
I've never heard this story. That is
Oh,
so. Maybe you've told me. That's unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. And then of course the punchline is that is a example of what we call synchronicity. If you wanted to know what that word means, that's an example of it right there.
Oh man. Oh, that's and so how so it was fairly soon after that you started recording with him, right? I mean, it was
Yeah, so basically what happened was he told me about it. Then he goes in, they cut his vocal on Money for Nothing.
yeah.
Then he says, in a couple of weeks, when you get home, call me, gave me his number, call me, we'll get together. So when we get together the first time at SIR Studios in New York, that day that we got together was the day the band showed up.
Oh, okay.
He had already been listening to a bunch of people, but that day the band converged on that room. Kenny, Branford, Daryl, and me, and Sting. And it felt like from the moment we played together, it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like right away, it felt amazing. And then we rehearsed for about a week, and then Sting's management set up what they call a secret gig, unannounced, which means that, for Sting, there'll be a line 3 times around the block to get in.
Yeah.
It was a small club in Greenwich Village where we played the music for the Dream of the Blue Turtles record live for the first time before we recorded the record.
No kidding.
I have a cassette of that somewhere, of that gig. I got to find it.
Wow. So all those songs were written before you went in the studio. You guys,
Oh,
everything
yeah.
all done. Yeah.
He had them even when he was auditioning the band. He had all the songs were done, I believe.
Got it. Okay.
And we played those songs at that gig. Forgot the name of the venue. And I think we played 2 nights at that place. But it was really cool because it gave us a chance to work out things in front of an audience. It's good to play music sometimes in front of an audience like that.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then from there, we flew to Barbados to track the album. The album was tracked in March of '85 at Eddie Grant's studio in Barbados. Remember Eddie Grant?
Electric Avenue. Yeah.
Gonna rock on to
Yeah.
Electric Avenue. Right.
Yeah. Oh man.
Great studio, man. It was
I'll
like a giant sugarcane farm. And in the barn was this state-of-the-art recording studio. I mean, Electric Avenue was such a big hit. He had everything in this barn, a crazy SSL console, Studer tape machines, racks and racks of incredible analog outboard gear. I mean, it was a really incredible space to work in.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's funny because I remember kind of in the morning riding around the farm on his tractor with him, and he was teaching me how to cut, the canes and stuff on the sugar.
Yeah.
Cane. He was a trip, man. So these are fun memories, and then also going to the beaches. Sting would want to be in the water while the sun was up. He's a great swimmer. So the sessions wouldn't start until late.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun, man. So we took about, I'm gonna say the record was tracked in a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't remember me being there that long. Maybe I did all of my tracks in a week, and then they stayed and finished up. And then from there, that was March, April, May, we flew to Paris and did the movie Bring on the Night. And then June, July, we had time off. Daryl Jones and I did a record with John Scofield called Still Warm during that time.
Yeah, my friend Mike Powers, who's watching, great drummer, great singer, had mentioned that, and I think he put a comment up while we've been chatting, just saying, amazing record.
Yeah,
Still Warm. Yeah, Omar's drumming is so grooving. Yeah, Thanks.
we had a lot of fun, and it was you know, Schofield wrote some incredible stuff for that record. And then in August we took off for Japan. First official gig of the tour. By now the album's out. Everything happened really fast. The album's out. The single "Set Them Free," "If You Love Somebody," "Set Them Free" was a #1 record, and
huge. Yeah.
The video was playing on MTV, and then the first gig is like Tokyo, 40,000 people opening for Foreigner. What a ride, man! And so that tour went from August '85 to like April '86.
Man.
Yeah. It was a fantastic experience.
That's a great ride, man. And it just, I mean, you know, we could keep going. I think we're going to have to do a follow-up episode to this, because we're only in the 80s right now, and I've kept you here a while. And I also wanted to mention, I didn't mention this before, but I do a separate podcast show called Track Talk, where I did one the other day with Stan Lynch, and we talked about Tom Petty, "Stop Dragging My Heart Around." I'm going to have Steve Gadd on Monday talk about Asia. Yeah, so I would love to have you come back on a separate Track Talk, and we can pick any one of these 10,000 songs that you played on, and really do a deep dive. But
man, that sounds like fun. You know, it's interesting too that you're focusing on like a lot of the kind of the rock records that I've made. And it's interesting because I've been in the studio for the last couple of months working on a solo project, and this time I decided to focus on my rock influences. And I'm always helping other people make rock records, and when I do my solo records, they're kind of a blend of fusion and pop and funk or whatever. But I was like, you know, this time I think I'm going to just go back to my rock roots and just have some fun. So I'm 8 songs into a 10-song album right now. I'm calling the album "Come Out to Play." I even dusted off my guitars. I got Vernon Reid to help me on a track. My longtime bass player, Jerry Brooks, is playing bass with me, but most of the stuff is me playing guitar and keys and singing. And so I can't wait to share this, because this is kind of a fun project for me and a fun statement. And and I'm probably gonna go out and tour it this time, you know.
Great.
And take it out to my friends out there, and maybe we can have some fun together on the road, you know.
Absolutely. Any idea when do you think sometime this year you'll have it ready?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying to release by the end of summer, you know, like August, September. My manager's slowing me down because she's like, "Do not put this record out yourself." She said, "You need support on this one." And I'm like, you know, I was like, okay, let's do that. Let's get, you know, we have a lot of friends at the labels. Let's see if we can get them to help us on this one with the marketing and everything. And so it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to sharing it.
Man, that's exciting. Well, I'd love it if you came, you know, and did another one of these too, to help get it out there to drummers too. We could do
I would love to, man.
Yeah, we could just focus on the record. We could play some songs, and absolutely.
Cool.
Pat Mestellato.
Oh, Pat.
Yeah, Pat's watching, and he says,
"Yay."
Yeah. All right.
Oh man, he is such a badass, isn't he?
He sure is. Yeah, I'm going to be getting Pat on here. Yeah, I got to get Pat on here. We're overdue. Yep. But Omar, I so appreciate all your time today. You've been so generous with it. I told you it'd be about an hour, and we're working on 2. And
all good.
This has been a blast. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I certainly have enjoyed it, and I'm happy to know that so many of my friends and colleagues are watching too. You know, our drumming community is really beautiful, man, because, you know, guitar players don't have this kind of community in the same way that drummers do, or keyboard players, or any other instrument, man. You know, and it's incredible how the drummers all come out and support each other. And I have a theory about the reason for that. I think that the reason is because we all know what each other has to go through to play this instrument.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
we're bonded.
Dude, I understand.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know what I mean?
Something to that. Yeah, there really is.
And I really do believe that because of the nature of the instrument, the fact that in many cultures it is the communication device,
Yep.
and it's a huge part of language, and rhythm moves the heart and soul of people all around the world. I mean, music is the one thing that everybody in the world agrees on. We might not agree on politics or religion or whatever, but we all agree on music.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
And that is the beauty and the power of music, and being a musician, and having the privilege to share and contribute to this world.
Absolutely. Well said. And, I was going to say, as drummers too, I think we can all relate and commiserate to, the band leader or the songwriter or the producer telling you it's too fast or it's too slow, or, I want the tempo, you know what I mean? And we all kind of share that same bond
man.
of like, we in the trenches,
No, it's a beautiful thing. And what's also fun about drummers is, it's the style and the way that drummers play rhythms or feel rhythms is as unique as your fingerprint. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's because, 5 guys will sit down and play a simple funk groove or a simple rock groove, but they'll have their own swing that it's hard for another guy to replicate that, because it is their fingerprint. Like I said, it's their, you know what I mean? And that, I love hearing that, and I recognize that, and it's fun to observe in many ways,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Omar, thank you so much for being here today. And I everybody, please give Omar a big hand, the great Omar Hakim. And if you'll hang with me for 1 second, we'll end the broadcast, and then I'll see you in the room there. But thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, indeed.